Hey everyone, Jeremy here. Welcome to the channel and welcome to our Andor series finale chat. That almost hurts a little bit to even say. What an incredible journey we've had with this series. I could talk about this show for ages, and I have a feeling we will be talking about this show for ages. Before I get right into it though, hope everyone's weekend is going well. Hope you're having a good weekend. Hope if you're getting hit by some of the storms that have been hitting across the US anyways, that you're safe. But otherwise, yeah, I just hope you're having a good weekend on top of that. If anyone is wondering, no, I have not watched the new Superman trailer yet. I had surgery on my eye this week, so I had to put everything off by a couple of days. Because I didn't even watch Andor the night it came out. I had to wait a day or so before I tried to watch that because I could see. But now I have twice. I've watched all three episodes twice and Rogue One directly thereafter yesterday. And that definitely changes my perspective on that movie. In fact, I find the tonal change when we get to Rogue One a little surprising. Or not surprising, but it was just, it was an adjustment because I didn't remember Rogue One having such an adventurous tone, because I think of Rogue One as being this very serious take on Star Wars, which it is, but in comparison to Andor, it's not as bleak. So it is an adjustment. It is a bit of a tonal change. I don't know if anybody else has experienced that yet, but it is an adjustment. But having watched all of it twice now, I do pick up so much more, and it definitely does recontextualize Rogue One in some of the best ways, really. Cassian's change of heart at the end of Rogue One is very much more impactful now. Some of the things he says throughout, like even when he was sent to kill Galen, and and in that scene, he decides not to do so. He comes back and has this kind of explosive reaction with Jyn saying, I didn't do it. Now, did I? And it reminded me so much of so many of the arguments he had throughout the series. And it just recontextualized all of it, because Cassian was this person who was always fighting against what was morally compromising and what was good. And we saw that constantly throughout this series, that he knew there was a difference, but he would go for the moral compromise if it got the job done. But he would also go against orders. So many times he did this if he thought it was the right thing to do. One thing that I didn't consider it a negative, but I did consider it curious, because Cassian kept taking off. In the last three episodes, not the finale three, but the prior three episodes, in those episodes, he hops in a U-Wing and takes off against orders, just because he was going to save Mon. The next three episodes, he defies orders, hops in a U-Wing and takes off. But then I realized, watching Rogue One, that was there to establish a pattern. He was like that. They knew he was like that. That if there was a job to be done, he would hop in his ship and take off. And that's exactly what happened in Rogue One as well. So it was very interesting that they did set up all of these parallels and really paid off character moments in that movie now. I just saw a comment come in. Saru, how you doing today, Saru? We thank the maker to make it to the end of this fantastic and thoroughly enjoyable series. Yes. This series, it was just incredible, from start to finish. Now, I could see someone who hasn't seen Rogue One get to the end of the series and be like, but it just kind of ends there. It's on a cliffhanger. Not a cliffhanger. Wow. But that does remind me of something else when watching Rogue One that is a little jarring, because Cassian isn't the main character of Rogue One. Jyn is. Jyn is very clearly the main character of Rogue One, and Cassian is behind her, let's say, in lead. You know, she's first, he's second. So that's a little jarring when watching Rogue One, because in my mind, as I was going from that finale right into Rogue One, I didn't forget, but I guess I didn't mentally prepare that, oh yeah, we're going to shift perspective hard because we're going to be following Jyn more so than Cassian, which actually is still very true to this series, because we didn't just follow Cassian in the show called Andor. We followed Mon, we followed Luthen, we followed Bix, and we followed Vel, and we followed, we had all these characters, Wilman, we had all these characters we followed throughout. And it also, and which ties into how they do Rogue One, where Cassian, once again, and this is where I think this series excels in its storytelling, especially around Cassian. And that is from the start of this series. Cassian collects people. Cassian has this way about him that meaningful and important people circle around him, or they become important. Not that people aren't important in general, but he has this magnetism to him that the right people tend to find him, that the people that he will need and that will need him tend to find him. And that stays true throughout this entire series and into Rogue One, which I thought was really, really interesting. Gonna see what people are saying right now before I just keep gushing. Baronessa, General Kenobi. Remember Gorman. Baronessa, I have not watched Rogue One yet, afraid it will hit harder. It does. That ending on the beach, I was not okay. I was really not okay. I'm getting choked up thinking about it. The moment that even hit me almost as hard, but I think it's more because I knew what was coming. But it's still going to be emotional going forward. There's the scene where he decides, he and the rest of the squad, which I can't think of their names right now, they do have an actual name, Melshi heads them up. They come to Jyn and decide they're going to support her. And he does this speech about how they've all done things in the name of the rebellion. Things they, lose sleep over, essentially. And that speech hit me so hard because now we have context behind it. We know the things Cassian's had to do to keep the rebellion alive, to build this rebellion. So yeah, Rogue One, especially certain elements, hit so much harder now. And K2's, the loss of K2, the Force was leading him up. Boy, I'm going to be jumping around all over the place if I don't just kind of start going through the episodes. But yeah, I do, just real briefly, I loved the healer looking at him at the very end during his long walk to his ship, about to leave for, and is it Antiva? And I can't remember the name of the place. When he's doing that long walk and he sees her and he just gives her a nod, and the look on her face, like she could see the Force swirling around him. She could see that his destiny was coming. The Force Healer was great. Yes. Yes. And, when that happened in the series originally, I was thinking, we haven't really had the Force in here, so I wasn't quite sure. I didn't hate the scene. I was kind of indifferent to the scene. I was like, or not really even indifferent. I was kind of 50-50. Like, well, I didn't hate the scene. I didn't love the scene. I wasn't quite sure how I felt about it. But now, having watched Rogue One again and remembering or realizing really how much the Force was involved in that movie, to not have any mention of the Force in this series, not to touch on it at all, would actually be far more jarring than if they had left it out. Because, for one thing, you got Vader in Rogue One, and you also have Cherutin Baze, who followed the will of the Force. So I think that was really the Force Healer. Now, in retrospect, I think that was a brilliant choice on their part. I really think it was a brilliant choice. But let's just go back, because I want to talk about the entire 3 episodes, not just jump around everywhere. The first episode about Luthen. Axis is found. That hit me way harder than I was expecting. I knew, or I think we all suspected, that Luthen wasn't making it out of this. Luthen knew he wasn't making it out of this. A sunrise I will never see. That line will live in history for Star Wars. Baronessa, shouldn't we also talk about the episodes we didn't talk about last week? Funny. But yes, focusing on the finale, and well, I'm sure we're going to touch on every single episode. But his death, his finale in this, I didn't expect it to be the crux of these last 3 episodes. But it was. It was Luthen and the fallout of all of his work in a good way. It was really the culmination of it all. And I don't want to jump ahead. I'm going to jump ahead if I'm not careful. So when the episode started, and here we are with him and Clea, he's getting ready. He's putting on his, guys as Luthen Rael, the Antiquities guy, going out to see Lonnie. That is one of the best spy work scenes I have ever seen. I've watched a lot of spy movies. That is some of the finest work, period, in that genre. Them talking to each other, the way those shots were framed, the way they isolated each of them in certain frames, the way they shot them from different angles, and that conversation. That conversation was everything that Luthen had worked for. That is why he had Lonnie on a string this whole time, for something like the Death Star. Because he needed to learn that information. If he didn't, there would be no rebellion after. I saw this great meme the other day of just, it was Cassian pushing, it wasn't really Cassian, but it was, they put Cassian's face over it, a guy pushing over a block, and it's killed 2 guards on Morana. And it just leads to the destruction of the Death Star. Without Luthen Rael, not only would the rebellion have not got off the ground, would Mon Mothma had never become leader, they would have never known about the Death Star, and they would have been destroyed in their infancy. So that scene is so, so important. I just Luthen went out like a boss. And the conversation with Dedra was magnificent. Oh, getting there. And Lonnie, a true hero of the rebellion. Absolutely. And that's what I want to go into is I was always afraid for Lonnie. I was afraid he was either going to get found out or Luthen was going to kill him. Because I think we even had this conversation a while back. Well, we had a conversation about Dedra. I don't know if we had this conversation about Lonnie. But Lonnie was a character that, sure, if he was working with the rebellion proper, not Luthen, I think they might have extracted him and put him someplace like in a safe house somewhere. But with Luthen, he had no choice. And I think he always knew he'd have no choice because Luthen wasn't going to be able to stash Lonnie anywhere. He was way too hot. He was glowing. The Empire would have never, ever stopped looking for him because of how much he knew. Because he knew so many of their secrets, they couldn't let him live. So he would have become public enemy number one. So I don't know that, while I think the rebellion proper, Captain or General Cassian's boss, can't think of his name, that general who was heading up their intelligence network, he might have decided to keep Lonnie around in some safe house somewhere to get more intel out of him. But I'm still stressing that might, because there really was nothing you could do with Lonnie in the rebellion proper. So while I was sad Luthen killed him, and I really was, I felt like Lonnie really deserved to get out, or at least his family did. I also suspected his days were numbered as well. I'm missing a lot of comments, so gonna read some comments before we move on, because I definitely want to start talking about that Daedra conversation and then get into the hospital stuff and the stuff with Clea. Oh dear God. Summer, good to see you in here, Summer. Holy moly, I actually made a chat. Glad to see you here. I love Andor showed that the fall of the Empire was all down to teamwork, not one true hero. Some happenstance, some deliberate, but all a group effort. Absolutely. And it makes me feel like we need a Rebellion era series similar to this now. Like, let's get it like a Rogue Squadron series or something like that set during this time frame. Maybe not even Rogue Squadron, but something else set during the Rebellion era, so we can see what it was like for the people living through it that were not Jedi, that were not Han Solo, that were not Princess Leia. But this does give us a great look into that already. Summer, I also love how Andor was about sacrifice, but it was also about inheritance. Everyone has their own rebellion, but everyone is also inheriting something from those that came before them. 100%. What they were fighting for, and this is very true when you rewatch Rogue One, getting choked up, thinking about this. When somebody falls, the next person picks it up. And knowing that lets you be okay with falling. And this show really threw that, or really illustrated. Luthen always knew he would go down. But he also knew when he did, he'd have done so much that others could carry on. That was his goal. His goal wasn't just to end the Empire. He knew he probably wouldn't see that. His goal was to make sure that everybody else was able to keep going after he was gone. And Cassian was the same way. It's really, and Melshi, all of these characters, Vel, Cinta even, who we lost a few episodes back. I feel like that really comes through. Ooh, getting emotional. Did not mean to get emotional today. Ooh, Baronessa, empire equals selfishness, everyone working for their own benefit, rebellion equals trust and working together, building up teams, friendship, communities. Yes. Just yes, that was something I was going to touch on today because it does really illustrate why, well, uh, the manifesto, oh my God, I love him so much. The manifesto, who wrote it? I can see his face. I should have character names up so I could just do this, but, somebody will leave it in here. Nimic, thank you, Nimic. Nimic's manifesto, when I'm jumping ahead again, I'm trying not to jump ahead. When Partagast was listening to that, by the way, I think there's some people out there that think he was like, oh, now I see the rebellion's point. I should have been a rebel. I don't believe that at all. I think that was the moment he realized there was some truth in what Nimic was saying about how fleeting and how desperate the Empire is to hold on to control, and how unnatural it is and how difficult it is to maintain that kind of control. I think he was listening to that and realizing, oh God, this guy's right. It is so hard. Here I have been working. I've been the guy who has been maintaining control behind the scenes this entire time. That has been my primary job, and we can't do it. So I think he was in the middle of an existential crisis, to be honest, much like Cyril was the prior week. But in Cyril's case, I think he saw the Empire for what it was, and Partagast, in a sense, does, but not in a, oh, we need to overthrow the Empire sort of a way. It was more of a, oh God, my entire life's work is worthless, and the rebellion might actually win. So yes, the selfishness is absolutely something they illustrated here, because the people who are banding together and trying to do their best and save the galaxy are doing better than the Empire that keeps failing. An Empire that imprisons or kills the people who just fail once. Daedra screws up, let's throw her in jail. We'll get to that one, but I'm missing so many. I want to read more. Oscar, hola. I watched the last arc, episodes 10 through 12, followed by Rogue One, and saw Star Wars Episode 4. The films felt different and grounded, especially Rogue One, knowing now the sacrifices to get the message out, starting with, where's your rest of your, Supervisor Lonnie. Yeah, Lonnie Young. Forgot his last name was Young. And ending with R2 delivering the plans to the council. Tony Gilroy's Andor saga has enriched the original trilogy. I agree. And I was mentioning earlier that Rogue One's tonal shift, because it is a bit lighter in tone than, even though we all used to say, or I used to say, that's like the darkest Star Wars there is. And now it feels so much lighter compared to Andor. But if it didn't, it wouldn't be able to work with A New Hope. Because I'm realizing that there is this shift, but it shifts from Andor to Rogue One. It almost goes like this, where Andor is really dark. Then you get to Rogue One, and then you get to A New Hope, where it's much, much less bleak. But yes, those flow together so well. I fully agree. Don't want to miss some of the comments. Crimson, really did open things up about the rebellion's beginnings, besides Krennic and Yularen, though. Should there have been more cameos, you think? Tarkin or Thrawn, maybe? No, because I think they would have been distracting. I think Thrawn, you could have mentioned Thrawn. I think we've mentioned Tarkin throughout this, especially, the Tarkin massacre. And we've mentioned Palpatine. I liked them leaving it like that, though. And it's because that feels very A New Hope. In A New Hope, we never saw the Emperor. We just saw the admirals. We just saw Moffs. We never saw the Emperor. And we saw Vader. So this felt natural to the way that film had set up the hierarchy. Like, the Emperor was a boogeyman. in A New Hope. And he really felt that way here as well. So, and Tarkin as well, a little bit. Like, kept mentioning Tarkin. Like, I was like, oh, who's this Tarkin guy? And then, so then you finally meet him in Rogue One, and it kind of makes that worth it. Even though rewatching Rogue One, I do feel if they want to do a special edition of that and fix the deep faking on him, I would appreciate it, because I am now a person who finds, I never did before, till last night, I now find the deep faking on it, Tarkin, distracting, but still a great role in the film. Summer, there would have been nowhere safe in the galaxy for Lonnie. He's high enough in the echelon that he would have been bait for a Force user hunt, too many secrets, and he's too useful. Yeah, I don't think anyone could have stashed him. I think they would, like I said, the rebellion might have thought about it, but like, let's put it this way, Mon and Bail and the rest of the council might have thought about hiding him if he had been working for them. But our general friend, the actual intelligence operatives in the rebellion, it would have been a Galen Erso all over again. It would have been, yeah, they want you to go rescue him. Don't do it. Kill him on sight. We can't take the chance. It'd have been the same as that, probably. And hey, Edward, see you in there too. We also saw why during the OT the Empire leans on the naval intelligence and Vader front and center, and ISB is in decline. Oh boy, is it. I want to get through these, but then I want to start talking about some of the other stuff. Idea, a series focusing on rebuilding a Blue Squadron post Yavin. That'd be cool. That'd be really cool, since we lose Blue Squadron in Rogue One. And we know they come back later. Sean, the sunset Luthen would never see appear or occurs on the beach at the end of Rogue One. Yep. It's the last sunset Cassian sees as well. But it's just like Cassian said to Mon, and he's actually said it a couple other times too. He made it worth it. That's all he ever was trying to do, was make it worth it. And he did. Ooh, that scene hits so much harder. Krevlin, good to see you in there. Yeah, Edward, when I watched Cass's death, reminded me of Luthen's speech, I burned my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see. And also, that is what the Force wanted him to do. Yes. I don't even know. You could argue about whether or not it was the Force's will for him to do that, or if the Force just knew. Like, that there was a destiny that surrounded him. I tend to believe in the Star Wars universe, destiny is somewhat what you make it to. The Force wants you to do certain things. It will guide you towards certain things, but it still comes down to your own choice. Chris, well, if Lucasfilm really wanted to, sirens, don't know if you can hear that. Lost my place. Wanted to, they can bring back Daedra Miro as a villain post Return of the Jedi as part of the Imperial Remnant. They could. I'd rather they let her rot, but they could. Well, there's a lot of things you could do still with this property, but like I was even joking, I was talking to my parents who had just watched it too. I was saying, you know, if they ever come out and decide to make a Cassian and K2 movie set between episodes, you know, or before the final episodes, I'd watch that. We got a couple years, or actually about a year, of those two running around doing missions together. them and Melshi. I'm just saying, I'd watch it. Doesn't have to be about the Death Star. It can be about other things. Uh, Not thinking they'll do it, but I would watch it so many times. Ooh, Baroness, I like that. I saw someone calling it the bridge between the real and the mythical. Yeah, Andor to Rogue One, those are the bridge, and then the mythical becomes A New Hope. Yeah, I totally see that. That's a really good point. Edward also thinking that Dedra worked on both Death Stars. Yikes. Yeah. She still gets to work for the Empire, though. Good for her. Um, Summer, I just saw you mention some of her mates have been playing Claire Obscure Expedition 33 for the past 2 weeks. So have I, very obsessively. And it illustrates the hope and despair of Andor, of what it means to fight while holding faith in others. Their whole mantra of, I'm blanking on it now, even though I've heard them say it so many times. For those that follow, for those that follow, and for those who will come after. That's it. That is so very much Andor, because it is very much a situation of, like we were saying earlier, the rebellion fights in increments. You are trying to carry the ball as far forward as you can before you go down. But you know the next person right behind you is going to pick up that ball and keep going. And that was such a big point of Andor, and it really comes through in Rogue One. At least it did for me. Sean, everyone was operating from their own perspective. I see the Force in this series as more of a more collective spirit. Interesting. It wasn't until Rogue One that True Rebellion formed. That was their first. Yeah, technically the rebellion exists. The Rebel Alliance already exists, but that was their first victory, because that is literally in the opening crawl of A New Hope. Is they had just had their first victory against the Empire as the Rebel Alliance, and that is on Scarif. And that is kind of the day that the rebellion is actualized as a fighting force to the Empire. To them, they already existed, but to the Empire, they were just still this ragtag bunch. But I missed Summers. If they have a Down in the Dirt show about rebuilding Blue Squadron, they need to ensure that every engineer and mechanic is 150% insane and provides 270% effort just to keep things true to life. Love that. Edward, I wanted to see more connection to Rebels, show dealing with the rebellion. In my opinion, the liberation of Lothal is one of the most hopeful moments for the rebellion. Right, but that also happened between episodes. That would have happened between or before episodes 10 through 12. So that would have been between 9 and 10 that was occurring. So there really wasn't a need to mention Rebels in there as far as I'm concerned. Again, I like the focus of the story. I don't want them to get distracted by the, hey, look over here, you know this person. That's a Marvel thing to do, and something that I think's been hurting that property. So, and honestly, it's hurt Star Wars to a degree too, because they've been doing it in other series. And I think it gets too distracting. If it doesn't add to the story, then it's just a distraction. And I think Tony Gilroy and all the production crew understood that. Especially when you're telling such a serious, grounded story like this in a sci-fi setting. Oh, there's a possibility the New Republic would free Daedra or even hire her. Space paperclip. Oh no, Baronessa, you're not wrong. When they went and cleared out the prisons, but Daedra would have been on a list. Daedra would have absolutely been on a list. The intelligence community would have known who she is, the rebellion at large, or not necessarily the rebellion at large, but the rebel intelligence, the centralized intelligence, the people that Cassian reported to would know who Daedra is. So the minute they freed her and knew her name, she would absolutely be on a list. I don't think they would try to reform her because she would be wanted for war crimes. Yeah, I don't think they would just full on. The people we've seen go through the reform and be put back into society are typically those that were lower ranking. Daedra was way too, she's an ISB. I don't think they would allow that. They would flag her. Being an ISB, you're usually the loyalist of the loyal. Before I'm just going to be reading comments if I want to comment on some other things that happened. The Daedra conversation with Luthen. I really want to get to that. Holy crap. Daedra's an idiot. She wanted glory. She wanted to gloat. Oh my God, does she personify the Empire? The fat and satisfied. She wanted to gloat that she finally caught Axis. The only reason she went in there. She should never have gone in. One, she wasn't supposed to do it to begin with. She shouldn't have gone in, period. That should have been a tactical team that walked in, put him in cuffs or stunned him, and dragged him out. Instead, she had to have her aha moment and gloat. And that was her downfall. So very Imperial. So Palpatine, gloating before, ha ha ha, I've got you now. Just twirl your mustache more, why don't you? Why don't you monologue a little bit? Tell them your plan. And she got everything she deserved. That scene was terrific, especially is everything in here real? And him saying, oh, we've got one or two items that are of questionable import? Him being one of the items, most likely. So I loved that. I absolutely loved that. And the other thing being the knife. And the fact she didn't even think of the knife as something to be concerned with. I'm sure she thought, oh, I'm armed. If he comes at me with a knife, I'm well trained. I can drop him. She never entertained the idea he might use it on himself, that he might die for his cause. Unlike her and every Imperial we see who is typically scared to death before they die, she just has no concept of how far these people are willing to go for what they believe in. It was such a wonderful final lesson to Daedra from Axis. Oh. Now I'll go back into your questions because I really want to kind of walk through these episodes and talk to you guys at the same time. Grevlin, Krennic. Oh, yes, because we're about to get into him. You know what? Let's just talk about that for a second. The Krennic interrogating her afterward was the most brilliant thing I've seen on television in such a long time. Well, okay, everything in this series has been the most incredible thing I've seen. So really, that just is par for the course with this series. But it was just incredible because, one, for Ben Mendelsohn's acting choice to put his finger on her head, which, by the way, I watched some behind the scenes. That was an acting choice. He chose to do that. He put his finger on her head. For one, he is towering over her. We cut off his eyes to make him almost inhuman, to make him this force. Because I think a lot of people probably forgot how low of a rank Dedra is compared to him. Because I'm so used to seeing her give orders and, just throw her weight around and yada yada. And here is this person who, just look at the pips he has on his chest. He is so far above her, she is an ant. So when he put his finger on her head and is just pushing down, like, you are nothing but a bug to me. You are insignificant, while I am everything. One of the most incredible acting choices I've seen in a while. That whole scene, he did not care if she was a spy or not. He did. He cared where the information went. He did not care how. He cared if the information got out. He cared who it went to. Whether she was a spy or not did not matter. Her fate was sealed. No, there was no talking your way out of this. This is on you. You're done. So that whole scene was just mind-bogglingly good, because she had to also come to terms with, she was done. She was going to prison. She wasn't just going to get stripped of rank. They were going to toss her ass in a jail cell for the rest of her life for failing. Now I'm going to get to your comments because I saw so many critic comments. Chris, Krennic's face shot when Dedra is calling him out for his own incompetence and his position in the Imperial hierarchy. The only card that he can play to win the argument and do whatever he wants. Grevlin, Krennic was much more imposing in this season than he was in Rogue One. He was straight Nazi scary in this season. And we see why his power is diminished in Rogue One. Because this failure isn't just on the ISB, it's on him. The buck stops with him. And worse yet, it's not the only leak, because Rogue One and how this series ends is, no, more information is getting out. And that's on his watch. So basically Rogue One confirms the information from what we saw in this finale. And that information, the confirmation information, didn't mean for that to rhyme, that was fully under Krennic's watch, because that came from Galen, which they show in Rogue One, which is one of the reasons why Krennic's power just continues to evaporate and he becomes such a smaller and smaller man by the time that movie ends. Hey, Kay, see you in there, and see you too, Kenny. Summer, I also think Perrin's fate is interesting. He's shown with a sleeping companion. That's the gangster's wife. Yeah, Perrin's stepping out on the gangster's with the gangster's wife. Not great choices on his part. But he's alone in the end. All the pleasure seeking doesn't fill the void of selfishness. Exactly. Perrin looks like he's even more depressed than he was when he was with Mon. I think he loved Mon in a way. I think theirs was more of a friendship. but it was also had plagued with difficulties. And I think what we were seeing at the end was, because I've always thought of Perrin as kind of the symbol of everything wrong with the elites during this time. The elites just, they're apathetic. It doesn't affect them, so why do they care? As long as they're, still have their luxuries, they're just going to go along with it. And that was Perrin. But in the end, you saw how little those luxuries were bringing him joy anymore. His daughter had been married off. His wife, even though it was an arranged marriage, was now a fugitive who he might never see again. So he was completely alone now. And I think that's what we saw at the end. It's that this life of excess left him devoid of fulfillment, because the things that mattered were gone, because all he ever cared about was excess. Had he truly cared about Mon, she would have brought him in. Or at the very least, at the very end, when they were planning her escape, they would have planned for Perrin to go with her. That wasn't even on the table. Sean, I appreciated they had that moment here for all his effery. Perrin represented the blind eye people turn. He didn't even recognize what a powerful, important person Mon was. I will point out, I heard there was a deleted scene. I don't know if this is true. I need to find out if this is true. I heard there was originally going to be a scene where Perrin told her he knew everything, and was telling her if she had trusted him, he would have helped, blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I'm glad if that was true, if they were really going to do a scene like that, I'm glad they didn't, because I think that's antithetical to the character. Because I really think Perrin really just wants, Perrin just wants to have fun. He filled a role we desperately needed in this series, because we needed to see what the elites were doing, and we needed someone to represent that. Uh, Sean Dedra played checkers and Luthen chess. Oh, and real quick shout out to the fact that we found out Luthen was being literal when he said he's using the tools of his enemy. When we found out he was literally using an Imperial broadcast tower to patch in his radio. Just slow clap. That's the biggest middle finger. It is such a big middle finger. In the heart of the city, using their own network to bring them down. Yeah, an absolute boss. An absolute boss. Um, oh wow, there's a lot of comments going on. I'm gonna try to catch up on some of them, but I do want to move on to talking about the Luthen backstory and his story with I almost call her Kira, with Clea. Oh yeah, Cyril's death was a blow to Dedra as well. Summer, yeah, he was one tether of somewhat human connection, and she got him killed, and it she knows that their relationship was pure poison, but it was human. Fair. And I think without him, it's really possible that she filled that void with her obsession with Axis again. And that's what led to her screw up. Um, Oh, Kenny, can we talk about Krennic's evolution of the character from arc 1 to 4? He starts out calm, cool, suave, almost friendly. Then by arc 4 in Rogue One, he's panicked, he's unhinged. He is Krennic reacting to what will prove to be the absolute worst week the Empire will ever face in terms of sheer losses. That is very true. We've touched on that a little bit. But yes, beginning of this series, think of him standing in front of that table, leading that presentation. Everybody was kind of all eyes on him because he is Director Krennic. He has all the pips. You know, he has this big flowing white cape. That is the guy you answer to. And he had these best laid plans. He was so commanding, so sure of what they needed and how they were going to get it, once Dedra told him anyway. And to see him now, but it makes perfect sense to me, because we go from that first episode where everything's under control, then we go to this. You're just progressing all the way to here, because we didn't really see Krennic all that much. But then we get to here, and we see his house of cards starting to wobble and what it does to him. He hasn't fully panicked yet at the beginning, but he is pissed. He is taking his frustrations out on Dedra, and he is ready to burn the Coruscant down to make sure his project does not leak out. So that's why by the time we get to Rogue One and he has to start dealing with Tarkin one-on-one, he is rattled. He is fully rattled because the ISBs failed him. He's finding out by the end of Rogue One, he's found out that Galen Erso is his most trusted engineer, and the architect of the Death Star has betrayed him, that the rebels may have the plans or at least have knowledge that they shouldn't have, which is one thing. The Death Star plans, no one knew inside the Empire the rebels knew of a flaw. Krennic does at the end of Rogue One, but that's it. He doesn't get to tell anybody, though. So it was fascinating to me that we really did see a progression of his character, or really a regression of his character like that, because he is panicked by Rogue One, because his power is fully evaporating, and Tarkin is one of the people taking it from him. Yeah, Edward, after watching Rogue One, Tarkin did to Krennic what Krennic did to Dedra. Just about. There's always a bigger fish. Love that. Oh, Kenny, I talked about the manifesto a little bit earlier. I don't think he was inspired by the manifesto. I think he realized there was some truth in it and that he was having an existential crisis, realizing the Nemik was right, that it is almost impossible to have total control, that his entire life was worthless and pointless, whatever you want to call it, because there was no way anyone can contain an entire galaxy like that and maintain control like the Emperor wants. It's just an impossible task. Sean, I like that. He realized the war was lost. He had balanced his entire life and career on a knife. Yes, that is a great scene too, because they do talk about, because Partagaz says to Krennic exactly what Tarkin says in, or not exactly, but says what Tarkin talks about in Rogue One. It should have been done by now. The Death Star was supposed to have been completed years ago. We find out in Rogue One, Galen Erso is the reason why it's not done. He had been buying time. He had been stalling. He kept waiting for the rebellion to figure it out. He kept waiting for something to happen. He was trying to put off the completion of the station. And Krennic was too stupid to notice. But I want to get into, well, okay, I really want to get into Luthen and his backstory. We're still only on the first episode here, people. I'm going to talk about Luthen and his backstory before we, we've been going for like an hour, I think, at this point. We haven't even talked about Luthen and his backstory. I find it fascinating that he was a sergeant in the Empire. And by the way, also, quick shout out to, I was talking about the CGI work in Rogue One on Tarkin and also on Carrie. Not a fan of that anymore. I think they need to touch that up. But I just lost my place. The de-aging of Luthen. That was some incredible makeup work. That, I think that was a combination of, I feel like they used a combination of actual makeup and digital makeup to bring his age down by about 10, 15 years. And it really, really worked. It really worked for me. But I do want to talk about his and Clea's story, which I had been a person who'd wondered what their relationship was this entire time. Not, desperately in need of knowing, but I could not figure them out. This story explained so much. She had a real love-hate with Luthen. Here he was, a man who helped preside over the death of her family, likely her entire community from the way it sounds. But he also saved her. And then went to war against the very empire that murdered her family, that she wanted dead. It was such a wonderful backstory. And not only were they building up this relationship together and building a rebellion, but you even got to see the inklings of how he built his antiquities business. Them just traveling around, selling relics they would find, selling antiques they would find to common junk traders. And they parlay that over, I'm assuming 15 years. I'm guessing it was about 15 years they were together. Because Clea I'm assuming she's in her mid-20s. Or supposed to be in her mid-20s. Mid to late. So 15 years would still put us in the right time frame. And when he picked her up, she was probably 10 to 12 years old. So to me, telling us that story really helped impact when we finally lost Luthen. And it really showed why they had the relationship they did. She was cold, because that's who she was, but she was also bitter at him to a degree for the way he treated her. But he did it for a reason, and she knew that. And for the fact that he was there. He presided over the death of her family and friends. Such a complicated relationship those two had. And the fact that when we meet him, he's going through PTSD. He's literally at the point where he's seen too much, where you can tell they're just slaughtering civilians. Their whole job, you can tell by the radio chatter, everything that's going on, they're just slaughtering civilians. Oh, we went into the basement and cleared them out. Yeah, I heard it on the radio. That's when he saw what the Empire was. That's when he knew he couldn't do it anymore. And finding Clea was kind of the catalyst for him leaving and abandoning his post, which one would assume he immediately did after he took her hand. I'm going to read some of your comments now on that. Yeah, the de-aging was fantastic. Still unclear what battle we found Sergeant Lear in, though. I don't think we're supposed to know. I'm sure it'll get told somewhere, but I think the point was it could be anywhere. Could be on any planet, at any time, during the Imperial reign, because that was happening everywhere. I think that's kind of the point, is that was just a Tuesday. Clea, the only way Clea could forgive Luthen is if he was fighting the Empire, and that's 100% true. That is, in a sense, how he was earning his forgiveness with her. Because in his way, Luthen absolutely loved her in his way, but Luthen was a very broken and bitter person. Sean, it audibly broke my heart to see their story and flashbacks from her point of view. I wonder if he even knew or even would have thought the same of her. Yeah, I genuinely think he loved her in his own way. As Luthen, yeah, he was a broken man. He was very broken. Everyone knew that. Even Clea knew he was broken. And I think I am going to jump ahead a little bit here. I don't think I know. One of my favorite scenes in the finale is when Clea is standing there watching the rebel troops run by, and she's just watching. She's kind of like just taking in Yavin, and her face softens. And she gets this very subtle smile start to form on her face. And it was this moment to me that said, we did it. Luthen did it. She was seeing what Luthen made. And it brought her a little bit of closure in that moment. So I found that scene incredibly powerful. It just a short, small moment, but both times I've watched now, it just really hits me that that is her moment of understanding. We accomplished what we set out to do. Okay, yes, I knew that. This was Elizabeth's first TV gig after acting school. She'd done some stage work Yeah, this was her first on-screen role, which is incredible. Clea just, I thought she had been acting for years. I was expecting like, oh, look up her IMDb and see what all she's been in. No, this was her first thing. Incredible. Sean, I think she didn't know how to open her heart. Cassian taking her to Yavin seems to be a start of a process of realization in Clea that she has a place now to open her heart. She realized maybe she fought for some for the wrong reasons, just like Cass came around to Jen's speech. Yeah, both he and Clea were very indoctrinated by Luthen. Not that that was a fully bad thing. I don't want to sound like I'm bad mouthing Luthen, but much like Cass, we know there is good and bad to Luthen. And Luthen, sadly, as we learn throughout these final episodes, has definitely ostracized himself from the larger rebellion. It, to me, sounds like he decided he was going to still operate on his own, that he wouldn't come in. Like, it sounds to me like they made the offer, that Mon probably reached out and said, Luthen, come in. You can work for intelligence here. We'll set you up, you know, yada, yada. And Luthen chose to stand alone. He chose to keep fighting his fight his way inside the heart of the machine, inside of Coruscant. And I think over the past couple of years, that has really poisoned some of those who did not work with him, because all they hear are the stories, especially the horror stories. Because he is the ends justify the means sort of a person. Not as far as Saw goes, but he goes pretty far. So I think with Clea, she also, I mean, she's been brought up that way. But the Vel scene, both Cassian coming to her and then Vel finding her, were incredibly important. Because in those scenes, they didn't need anything. They weren't asking for anything. They weren't looking for intel. They weren't looking for a job. They weren't reporting in. They were seeing her. They were talking to her. This wasn't the job anymore. And I think it was really important. And also a part of what led into that final scene, like, oh God, she's this young woman who's only had this life. Her entire life's been espionage. What does she do now when she's not being Clea, which isn't even her real name? And I think she realized that, and a part of what she saw there was, this is the thing. This is what we've been trying to build. Maybe I can help here. At least that's what I hope. Ainz, I like that. Tony said he told the Luthen Clea backstory so no one else could. Good. Good. Because it was fantastic. I loved it. I really did. And if you really want to show, or to see, I should say, how he did care for her, the detonator scene. He wasn't just getting her used to the idea they were going to be killing people. He saved her in that scene. She was going to hit that button and he stopped her. He hit it instead. He dove on that hand grenade. He knew in that moment she's willing, she's committed, but he couldn't let her kill like that yet. I'm sure he did later. But in that scene, he was still protective of her. That was fully him protecting her. That she may have been ready, so to speak, but he didn't think she should be ready. And so I thought that was a very important scene for their relationship. Yavin was going to be a place of healing as it had been for a lot of people. I agree, Summer. Sean, that's poetic. Maybe her smile was the sunset Luthen would never see. Possible. Oh, Kenny, that's a good point. It makes more sense why Luthen would be okay with Bix going on the raid at the interrogation lab, because he knew the only way to relieve her pain would be to confront the source. That makes a lot of sense. It also, that moment or that episode was really important too, because again, I go back to Luthen cares. He didn't just go to see Bix to evaluate how she was doing. Like, can I send her on missions? Is she going to be a liability? That sort of thing. Sure, he part of the job. But when he saw what was happening to her, he figured out he had to help. And I don't think that was all just business. I think he very much saw himself, and he very much saw Clea. That puts that in more perspective for me. So I think, much like you said, he saw that and knew, okay, I've got to give her the resolution she needs so we can get her back to normal. She deserves that much. Chris, I wanted to smack Bale in the Yavin Council scenes. I was coming unglued. I was very much in Cassian's shoes during the council scenes. When they started, what did they call it, running him down. When they started bad-mouthing Luthen in front of Cassian and Mon. Mon was biting her tongue. She's had practice. Andor, Cassian could not. He really laid it out there. I loved that scene though. I love how he stuck up for Luthen, and he stuck up for him in the right way, in my opinion, because when Bale says you don't have an objective opinion, so I'm not sure how much value it has, and Cassian going, no, you don't understand. Because I know Luthen, my opinion matters more than anybody's. I know the good and I know the bad. Perfect. I was so aggravated. Oh, the one guy that was in the council scene, oh my goodness, I was ready to just throttle him. Because he was so dismissive of Cassian, so dismissive of Luthen. I was taking off the rings, taking out the weave. Yeah, no, we're fighting. But I did think about this during the scene. It was hard to think about it because I was just seeing red. I did think about this after, and that was, we do, or at least I do, tend to forget, yes, it's the Rebel Alliance. Each of those people there at the table is the head of their own rebellion. They all have their own opinions, and they all have their own backstories. Their backstories don't include Luthen. Mon's does, but theirs doesn't. So to them, intelligence like this doesn't carry the same weight. I don't agree with them, and I think they should trust people like Mon and Cassian, but I at least understand that scene far better. Uh, Baronessa General Draven, thank you for saying Draven. I could not think of his name earlier. Behaves very Luthen-like in Rogue One, proving that he could have fit in the rebellion, and they were not so different. Luthen could have survived there. He didn't want to. He wanted to stay in the heart of the machine. He wanted to stay closest to it. He knew he was flying too close to the flames, but he felt like that was the only way he was going to get results, or the results they needed. And he was right. No one else would have found out those Death Star plans. He had to be running Lonnie, and he had to be there to do it. I mean, you could argue, oh, he could fly back and forth to Coruscant, but no, when Lonnie called like that, with that emergency, he needed to be on planet. So, yeah, he could have fit in, but he knew his place was in the cage with the beast. Kenny, the personality shift Clea goes through in the final episodes is heart-wrenching. You see just how lost she is without Luthen. She reverts to an almost childlike vulnerability. And yet, she proves herself as one of the most capable rebels, possibly in history, by what she does at the hospital. Before, real quick, MVP of the entire series, the old lady in the wheelchair. That, oh my God. I didn't know how much I needed that but I needed that old lady to appear in this episode to keep me from fully losing my mind in despair. But anyway, her infiltrating that hospital and doing it so if I can say the word, methodically, and the way she did it so quickly. She didn't wait around. She knew she only had a certain amount of time. She had to get in there. She had to kill him. And if it came to it, she would have killed herself too. It wasn't a rescue mission. I knew that from the jump. I think probably a lot of you did. That there was no way she was going there to save him. She was going there to kill him. He couldn't survive. There was, unless he was fully fine, obviously. But protocol probably dictated. One of us gets captured. There's no rescue. We have to take the opportunity to kill one another. And I found her final goodbye so hard to watch. When she kisses him on that forehead, yeah, I get choked up. Okay, you have friends everywhere. Such a wonderful way of Vel introducing her to Yavin. Ooh, I missed a lot of comments. I'm trying to scroll through and see. Summer, I think Vel and Clea becoming friends is a great transition from where they started in this first season, or in the first season. I think their growth is amazing. Right. Well, not even the first season. Think about them at the wedding. At the wedding at the beginning, they still were very standoffish towards one another. Sure, they were talking, blah, 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 but they separated pretty quickly. Like, they were almost, they seemed like rivals to a degree. So it was nice to see at the very end, they have nothing to be rivals about anymore. Even though they really weren't rivals, it was just there. It was that kind of chemistry. Ooh, I think Luthen became the Sin Eater for Clea. That's a great way to describe Luthen. He was a Sin Eater in general. He was doing the despicable things so good people didn't have to. Okay, and his words to her about banking her hate and losing and waiting until the right time to move. So important. Yes. And it's something, he really was teaching to even Cassian was, yeah, you really want to strike out, you want to do some damage to the Empire. I get it. I'm fully with you. But you need to pick when and where, and you need to be smart about it. Oh yes, and the final conversation with Vel and Cassian toasting. I love that. Okay, yeah, they left out Brasso, but that's only because Vel doesn't know Brasso. So he was kind of in the overarching uh Ferrix toast part of that. I think she knew about his mom, but she probably didn't know much about Brasso. I mean, they've probably told stories about him, but yeah, I think he just got kind of lumped into the Ferrix in general, just like Wilman's dad. Which, by the way, on my I didn't catch this on my first watch, did on the second. Didn't realize Wilman still, well, Wilman's got a limp now from everything that happened in the prior episodes. A year later, he's still got that limp. I thought that was just one of those many, many great character, not necessarily traits, but beats that they've been able to do in this series, where they've really made this world feel real with elements like that. Sean, I agree. I love the support for Luthen. Yes, it's messy business, but Luthen had a heart of Kuiper. Politicians getting schooled by Cass was awesome. When was the last time you spoke with him? A year ago, when he asked me to save Mon Mothma. Just tell him. You freaking tell him, Cass. Um, Summer Luthen knew that his was not a story to be spoken of after the war. He was a soldier, and most soldiers dream of an epic story to tell afterwards, but few actually have. The one good thing I was thinking about this, something that actually really um, unnerved me a little bit about Lonnie, and it goes for Luthen as well. Was in the end, I realized will Lonnie even be remembered as a hero? Lonnie was the person who first put them on the trail for the Death Star, and Luthen is the person who carried that information forward. Will anybody remember them? Clea. Because of Clea, who I assume will join intelligence at Yavin, she can be the person who tells their story now. So Lonnie will be remembered. So Luthen will be remembered. Will they be remembered like Luke Skywalker and Leia? And probably not. But they'll be remembered. Their contributions outlive them. And the people that matter will know. Clea was totally Agent 47 in that hospital. The cojones of her walking down the hospital hallway and just shooting that stormtrooper in the head. Which, by the way, anytime someone asks or makes a comment about what's the point of the armor, it symbolizes the entirety of the Empire. That armor is given to them for protection, yet they know it protects nothing. It is a false sense of security, which is what the Empire provides. Because all they want is control. They give you a false sense of security so they can maintain control. They give their elite stormtroopers all this fancy armor that does nothing because it gives them the illusion of safety and gives them control over them. Very well depicted in this series, especially these episodes here at the end. Okay, I think Clea was resigned to this being her end as well. Cassian saved her, though, because that's what he does, because he couldn't save his sister. He should stop saving people. Such a great line. Vel became a character I really loved by the end, by the way. Really, really love her by the end. I hope we see her again somewhere. That is not something I thought I'd say when we were doing the Aldani heist. But now I'm like, no, Vel's really warmed up to me. But I do want to, I think you're right that Clea had given up. Luthen was her world. Luthen was absolutely her world. She knew no other life. She had no family outside of him. She had no friends. I have friends everywhere. So what kind of life was she going to have? She even said it in the moment when Cassian's saying, come with me, Yavin. She's like, I know what they think of me there. And she's like, where am I going to go? You know, her life was there. She really could not picture going anywhere else. And so Cassian, as you said, did exactly what he always does. He saved a person. He showed her another path. Something he was good at, by the way. Because even though he follows Jyn in Rogue One, he has to get her to follow him first. Summer, I think Clea would have preferred to go out like Luthen. It was less frightening than facing a future without a war to fight. For someone who only knows war, peace is terrifying. Right, all she had was Luthen in the fight. But she still has it. And she's going to come around. But yeah, I agree. She just really couldn't picture a world outside of this. It was, in her mind, I think she always thought either they both went down or they both got away. Her on her own was not something she really entertained. Or at least she academically entertained it. She knew what she'd do on her own. But the reality of it was very different. Let Vel and Clea fall in love. They both deserve a happy ending. That'd be interesting. Oh, good point about Marva, Kenny. About Vel knowing about Marva because the Ferrix uprising would have happened at her funeral. That would have been well known. Heck, that probably went out everywhere. Everybody found out about that. She might be more well known than Cassian. Yeah, talking about Will, the reason he doesn't die in Rogue One, and the reason he's not on that mission, that limp. He obviously became, yeah, like you're saying there, Baronessa, he obviously became an engineer, became support crew. Still doing the fight, but unable to do it physically like that, like Cassian could. Wow, that's a good point. Willem might have a limp, but he was also de-radicalized from his exposure to Saw and the Rido. I think that shows a real sense of family between him and Cassian, as well as the hope for others. Yes, that was actually, if this show has any flaws, I would say I would have liked to have seen uh Willem or Willem, it's Willman, uh go through that de-radicalization. I would have, because the last time we see him in the 1 year is Saw seems to be radicalizing him. And then when we see him the next time, he's on Yavin and fully a rebel. I feel like there was a story in there we missed that I really feel like that was at least something we should have touched upon, and they really kind of glossed over. I don't know. That is probably the one storyline I feel like they really kind of sidestepped. And I get it, a lot can happen in a year. But their job as a storyteller is also to make it so we understand what happened. Oh, Kenny, that's a good point too. Will's limp, Vel's rank, and Clea's concussion are all a great explanation in canon for why they aren't in A New Hope or Rogue One. I mean, and in Rogue One, it's pretty easy for Will and Vel and Clea not to get mentioned. Clea is still recovering. Who knows what Vel's doing? And Will couldn't go on the mission. But also, you gotta understand in Rogue One, they have basically at Yavin, we're only there a little bit. We're not there very long. So I mean, I really didn't feel like it stood out that we didn't see them when I rewatched Rogue One, because it made sense that they wouldn't be around specifically for the moments we were watching on Yavin. Except for when they decided to follow Jin, but like everybody's saying, and I agree, is no, they, especially Wilman, wouldn't have been there, wouldn't have joined, couldn't have joined, I should say, Cassian on that final mission. And Clea was still recovering. She wouldn't have been there. She wouldn't even been technically formally a part of the rebellion yet. Vel's probably the only one that could have gone. But I still don't even picture, I don't picture Cass going to get her. Sean, I saw Star Wars in 1977, grew up with it. Finally, Star Wars grew up with me. Never felt so attached and changed by characters uh, like this series. It's hit me hard and stuck with me. I really, really want Star Wars to make another series like this. I really want them to make another serious Star Wars. Keep making the space fantasy and the wizards and the light swords. Yay. Yes, 100%. I mean, my favorite characters are literally emblazoned on my arm. And they have lightsabers and the Force and space magic. But there's so much room for a great grounded story like this, for great just sci-fi storytelling. And I hope they don't miss the point of this, that they don't overlook the fact that fans, older fans, will feel so appreciative and rally behind series like this. Do the fun stuff too, but they need to start balancing it better. Oh, Baronessa, armors are also for protection against slug throwers, not blasters. Yeah, but if the Empire really cared, they'd protect against blasters too. Or at least provide some protection against certain blasters. Blue Kyber, so glad you mentioned that. So many characters left alive that we might see in future projects. 100%. That is something that when we got to the end of the series, I was so grateful that so many characters lived. If any of you joined me, and I know a lot of you did in these earlier episodes, I was sitting here going, okay, so Willman's going to die, Bix is going to die. Kind of wanted Dedra to die, but I actually like her ending even better. Um, I Brazo was going to die. Actually, I was hoping Brazo lived in, of course, first episode or first series of episodes. Um, that does take us to the baby in the room, though, too. I have to talk about that one, too. I'm curious on what people think of the baby. Love that we got to see where B2 is, by the way. So happy for him, chasing around another robot, having fun. But yes, they left a lot of characters alive and able to participate in other series. And I don't think that's why they left them alive either. I think just like the child at the end, that's supposed to symbolize hope. The series, and I look at this now and I realize the series couldn't end with all of them dead. Because then where's the hope? It can't just be that Cassian's going to get the Death Star plans. It has to be in the people we save and the people that we protect. That hope has to exist in them too, in them continuing. And I think that was far more important than killing them off. And I find it very cliche to have Bix pregnant, or not pregnant anymore, but having a child, having Cassian's child and walking into the field and yada yada. That's very Western. We've seen, or even World War II, which this is very much based on. we've seen this before many times. But it does work for the message they're giving. Just like I said with all of them, and I think that montage at the end was about that too. Was even when Cassian's gone, this will continue because of him. And Bix will continue because of him. His child will continue because of him. That's hope, which was very important to illustrate at the end. And I'm glad they did. I'm glad it didn't end on a bleak note. Um, all right, missed a lot of, but very glad you mentioned that, Blue Kyber. Uh, Sean, can we talk about the game scene between K2, Cass, and Melshi? Best scene ever. Oh my goodness, them drinking and having a blast, playing. I think they were playing Sabak. I was having a hard time. I know I've played Sabak, but I couldn't quite follow what they were doing. I think, yeah, I need to go back and watch again. But anyways, yeah, that was a great scene. That was a great scene. I'm literally, they're going, oh, you don't have tens anymore. Oh, because he discarded. I'm literally trying to remember how to play Sabak. Never mind. That's not the point. The point is that scene was great. Uh, yeah, it really also illustrated the bond that had formed between them over the course of that past year. Because Melshi in that ninth episode, I think it was, had just gotten to Yavin. K2 was born, and Bix had just left. And those two apparently became kind of his family after that. And Cassian's now living in a bachelor pad, living his college days, getting drunk and playing cards with his buddies. It was great. It was great. It was also great to see Cassian happy, because that was something we didn't get to see a lot of. Even when he was with Bix, they weren't necessarily always happy because of the events going on around them. So, yeah, I thought that was a really important scene in a lot of ways, just because it established their relationship, but also it was just fun. It was just great. Alan Tudyk as K2SO. Dear God, my favorite droid. Just the best. Oh, that's a good point, Kenny. I think it was Will's shift on Gorman that made him believe in the Alliance. Saw would have let innocents die to advance the cause. Will has seen what happens when people are treated expendably. That's a good point. So that's probably what changed. I really wish they would have kind of given us a little more insight into that, but I think you're probably right, because it looks like Willman was embedded in Gorman for a while. Because obviously he's got his girlfriend there. They end up going to Yavin. So I think you're right. I think that kind of, I think he kind of had the experience that Cyril did, but from the rebellion perspective, from a Saw Gerrera rebellion perspective, where he got there was probably being programmed into a means to an end, a means to an end. And then once he got in, he realized, no, these are good people and I have to help them. And the rebellion is important. You're very right. I think that is exactly what happened now that you say that. Just saw your Kyle Katarn comments there, Kenny. Um, Chris, where do you think the story of the little people in Star Wars should take place? Gonna need a little clarification what you mean on the little people. I immediately went to Ewoks in my head when I read that. I assume you mean the average person, because I don't know where you put that. I feel like the average person, well, for one, their stories aren't going to be as interesting. So I don't know where you put their stories other than, I mean, the rebellion is the little people to me. That is the regular people. They've just come together for a greater cause. In fact, one of the things I loved in that finale was Mon and Vel having breakfast at one of the tables, just with everybody else. Mon, this woman who grew up in extravagance, who had breakfast at a table the same length as the one she was sitting at, that had this ornate furniture around it and all these beautiful furnishings and plates and utensils, and she's dressed to the nines. And here she is, dressed down, having breakfast at a table with a bunch of normal people. Her hair's not done up particularly great, not a lot of makeup, just hanging out. That woman was more free than she'd ever been her entire life. I loved that. Kenny, that baby made me cry. That's what I think. That's what it symbolized. Yeah, Kenny, that child's going to grow up in a world without the Empire because Death Star 2 will blow up in about 4 years. Yep. That baby will be 40-ish years old by the time the First Order shows up, and guarantee they were out there fighting, probably alongside Mama Bix, who in her 70s would probably still be kicking ass. There's nothing wrong with the cliche or tropes because when properly used, they are incredibly effective. Agree, agree. I just had it in my head as soon as she left. I was like, she's going to be pregnant and have a kid. It kind of like, it felt cliche before the cliche happened, you know? So, and especially over time, it's not going to bother me as much, but it is, I still look at it and go, yeah, it's a little cliche, but I also forgive it because I think it is a proper ending for the series. Summer, I think Andor earned the cliche of the baby. I think it also earned the cliche of Dedra in prison versus dead because her suffering is meant to bring hope that evil will suffer rather than end neatly. Um, yeah, I take her going to prison, which the best possible ending for her. Stripping of her of all her power, leaving her powerless in a cell, and going to be building Death Star parts for the next, presumably, 4 years. And then she'll end up in a New Republic prison after that. Yeah, yeah, that's fitting. Let her rot. She deserves it. She earned every bit of that. For all the suffering she imposed on other people, let her have a taste and let her see what her empire really was. The Empire does not care about you in the slightest. You are fully replaceable as soon as you malfunction. I think they were playing Sabak. Sabak uses dice. If you didn't know, for certain cards, it uses dice. Um, and it also uses those. They also use what are they called? There are special cards that can make certain things happen. It's complicated. I played a lot of it in Star Wars Outlaws, so I kind of know how to play. I need to play it again though, because I'm starting to forget. But yeah, I think they were actually playing Sabak. Um, because you see what you discard. So when he was discarding and everybody's sitting there talking about, oh, there are 2 10s, it was, oh, so you can literally see what they just discarded and you know what's facing up. So you know they don't have that. I'm pretty sure it was Sabak. Anyway. Okay, they hadn't been doing anything for the last year if they'd played over 800 rounds of that game. Short rounds, I guess. I know. K2 saying, we've played this game 836 times. That's a sufficient sample size. Just great. Well, I mean, if you played over the course of a year, what is that? Three, not even 3 games a night every day. So change that to 10 games over the course of 4 nights a week. Which, if it is Sabak, those games can go pretty fast. Even though some of you are saying it's Space Dominoes, something they made up. I don't know if that's from behind the scenes or not. But if it isn't a long, long game, yeah, 10 hands, it's not much. You could do that in a night easy. Kenny, oh, talking about the little people, you say their stories wouldn't be interesting, yet we got an amazing show about kids in the Star Wars suburbs, lol. But they were doing something interesting. I mean, that was our show about little people. All these are about little people that go on to do big things. So the point being, unless you're doing a sitcom or a documentary, I don't know, or maybe you're going to do a family drama in Star Wars. But no, I feel like all of that is one of the most basic and appealing parts of Star Wars is most of the people we follow. I mean, even Luke Skywalker is just a farm kid when he starts out. Han Solo's a smuggler, but he's not a hero of the rebellion. A lot of these people, Cassian was a thief. A lot of the people we follow start out small. The entire rebellion is just made up of farmers and so on. Or at least, some of them. It's all little people in the end. So that's just what I mean. It's, I don't think I'm going to watch a show about a shopkeeper on Coruscant, like the real Luthen Vale, rather than the fake Luthen Vale. Somebody selling antiques. Though you could probably make a really good drama about that, but as soon as you turn it into a drama, it's no longer necessarily little people because you're adding dramatic effects. It's just kind of how storytelling works. But yeah, usually our stories are about the little people doing big things. Somewhere the difference between Mon's and Perrin's ending is A plus plus. Mon is surrounded by rebels, people who would literally die for her. Perrin is in a limo where he might as well be by himself. And he looks drunk and miserable. Bix becoming the next Marva, I can see it. I fully could see Bix become the next Marva. Yeah, Krennic sending Dedra to the same prison that she sent so many as true karma. Absolutely agree, Blue. Absolutely agree. And that obviously was not lost on the writers, the creators, because she is one of the ones, isn't she the person? Yeah, in season one, she came up with the idea to uh, extend prison sentences. She's, well, the worst, and got everything she deserved. She earned that prison sentence. And under the rebellion, I have to believe they will continue that prison sentence indefinitely. Now, if they do want to do a series later where they bring her back and they use her as almost, and I can see this, they use her like an almost like a Hannibal Lecter like situation where, oh yeah, you're in a jail cell, you're going to stay in a jail cell, but you're going to help us out. I could see. And Tony Gilroy, if you're watching, or Lucasfilm, which, you know, I know you watch every week, you can have that for free. uh, Chris, I want Mon to carry the lines of Andor, make it worth it, or I have friends everywhere in her New Republic cameos moving forward. Well, now we can have Vel show up in a cameo too, which I'm super excited about. Especially if we see Mon again. Now I want a New Republic series. Ooh, that'd be kind of cool. Just a New Republic series following Mon. That could be kind of awesome. Well, maybe Mon and Vel, and heck, just a sequel series. Let's just do a sequel series. We'll follow Mon, we'll follow Vel, we'll follow uh, Leia after the events of Return of the Jedi. Watch them rebuild. But yeah, I do want to see these characters again now. I really do. I want to see. I do want to see more Amon now. I do want to see Vel again now. I don't want that saved for books. I want to see what happened to some of these people. Oh, Kenny, talking about Dedra in prison. Unless, of course, they don't do what they did to Cassian and erase her records, so she's just another prisoner and gets to start another life under a new identity. I don't think they would for her since she's Imperial, and they were doing that so they could keep their prisoners in there, which they would still do with Mira, but or Miro. But yeah, I'd like to think that she'd stay. I'd like to think that the Empire themselves would want her to stay in there because she would be dangerous to them if she ever got out. She knows where too many bodies are buried. Thankfully, they think she's low enough on the rankings that she doesn't have to be killed, but nothing. I mean, hopefully, I would think the Empire is competent enough to know, no, we do have to make sure we never let her out or interact with certain people. But it is the Empire, so you never know. Okay, so it's called Rianza, that game. Okay, so it came from Wikipedia. All right, it looked very similar to Sabak. Ooh, Kenny, okay, I would watch that series too. I would watch the hell out of an anthology show about an antiques collector telling stories behind each piece in his collection, night gallery style. Okay, that would be awesome in a Star Wars series. I mean, like I said, once you add the dramatic, yeah, you can tell a story about anything. But you, telling a story about just regular life in the Star Wars universe might not be as interesting. Uh, you know, This Is Us in the Star Wars galaxy doesn't sound as appealing as what you just pitched. Summer imagined her as a Hannibal style character during the 4 years while they rebuild the Death Star, and she's now hunting Mon, who is the face of the rebellion. Oh no, Baroness of Space West Wing. I would watch it. I would totally watch it. Oh, I would. You have me wanting that so bad now. Okay, yeah, a serious series to help recontextualize the sequels. Yes, please. I want to see, yeah, do a series. God, this show was so good and is so well loved. If Lucasfilm really did decide that they were going to follow, okay, people loved Mon Mothma in this. Let's do a series about Mon Mothma in the New Republic and all the things that go into that. And then you have, just like they did with this, you have your other POV characters that you follow. Maybe you have somebody in the military. Maybe you have somebody. You do have your kind of normal person in just down on the ground trying to navigate this new republic. And you could make a really cool series out of that. And I think it would. I think the more stories we tell in that time frame, the more it will help with the sequels and people digesting them. No, it would me. Ooh, Summer Vel as the hand of the king to Mon's Republic leader. I'd love that. Meet my chief of security. Erskine. Ooh, yes. And in a series like that, you could drive home the fact that people too quickly forget all the pain and sacrifice that goes into a fight, so we repeat the past, which is exactly what we were seeing in Ahsoka, where you had some politician who didn't take a side, which means he sided on the Empire during the Civil War. So you delve into that. You delve into all those. You could really do a sequel series in a sense. That was the New Republic. I wow. I really want this now. Summer, the Empire at this point is inflicted with a self-inflicted wound. The rot is coming from the inside, much like the House of the Dragon. That's what happens when it's so cutthroat versus collaborative. Yeah. I mean, it was mentioned before, but the Empire is selfish. The Empire is all about selfishness. It's all about what I can do to gain power, which is what Palpatine wanted. But that's also his flaw, because he thinks power is everything. And what he never understood was that community, that people actually working together, is actually stronger than individual selfishness. And it always will be. Oh, Kenny, how about this? The blacklist with Star Wars. The New Republic forces Dedra to help hunt down former Imp war criminals in exchange for a reduced sentence and limited privileges. I really don't want her out of jail, but I love the idea of a blacklist like show so in the Star Wars universe. That would be incredible. I'm trying to figure out if could we have somebody. I'd rather. I don't want her redeemed. I'm trying to think of a different character that we could do that with, that I'd be happier with. I don't think we have any living Imperials from this series that I can think of that would actually fit the role too. Because not many are left. By the way, shout out. We've been talking forever and we haven't even talked about the whole apartment raid. Oh my God, we've been going for 2 hours. That is how much I loved this finale. Anyway, we got to talk about K2 marching in and that whole apartment scene, then them getting Clea out of the apartment. We have to talk about that to a degree because it showed such a failing. It not only is it awesome, K2 wrecking shop. Oh my God. It was funny and a little scary how much he was just walking through those guys. Are you here with us? No. Just tearing them apart. And what he did, and this is what made me think of this, yes, K2 got a hallway scene. I just saw that pop up, K. Picking up, is that Hirt? The Dedra's former assistant, breaking his neck and then using him as a human shield. Are you kidding me? Yeah, when I said there were no living Imperials left to do that blacklist like show with besides Dedra, that is what I was thinking of. He met a gruesome fate, deserved every bit of it, because he was a little Miro. He was going to be just as bad. And it was so apropos for everything that was transpiring, because it did show, by asserting all their control, which is what Nemec is talking about in the manifesto, more things were slipping through their grasp. They put out this APB on a woman who has an infectious disease. Everybody must find her. So all points bulletin, everybody's out looking for her. So they can't even get backup when they need it, because they've sent everybody everywhere and everybody's in a panic. Because that's what happens when you don't have control. When you give someone that feels like they have control all the time, and then you throw something at them from left field, that's when they panic. because everything's supposed to be orderly and in control. Ugh. So when it's not, it all falls apart. And then it's exactly what happened to the ISB in that moment. And it was fantastic. And Partagast flipping it. Are you sure? That was such a human thing to do. And I loved it. Shout out to K2 for his meat shield. Um, I love the K2. God, it's always seen it. It was a horror show to the Empire. Yeah, using the tools of my enemy against them. Which it does still make you wonder why the K2s weren't put into full production. I wonder if it was just still about numbers. Palpatine always was about the numbers. Like, throw bodies at the problem. It'll take care of it. I have a feeling the droids were probably expensive to manufacture. And it was just cheaper and easier to use humans. Okay, here, is it Hirt? Yeah, it's Hirt. Because at first when they said his name, I always thought, did they say Admiral Piet? It's Hirt. Hirt was following the same path as Cyril. I know it was really a last week thing, but God, this show made KX droids so incredibly scary. Yeah, Kenny. We got a glimpse of it in Rogue One with K2, but we didn't see the full effect of them using those droids until the riot. Well, it's not a riot. It was a massacre. Till the massacre on Gorman. And it really did make them Terminator scary. Summer, I like that. Cassian became Luthen in the end and inherited his war and his tactics, but in the end, his fate was the start of someone else's story. I love that, even as heartbreaking as it was. Yeah. Cass took everything Marva taught him, took everything Luthen taught him, took everything he learned from Nivik, and he passed it on. Rebellions are built on hope. One phrase said to him on Gorman that he repeats to Jen, that Jen repeats to the entire Rebel Alliance, or at least the council that was there on Rogue One, which means it's going to get spoken again and again and again. That's how people live on sometimes. And Cassian, in all the tools of his trade, taught some of it to Bix, taught some of it to Willman, taught some of it, well, unfortunately, to that, I was going to say Melshi, but he's not going to carry that much longer. But yeah, everyone's ending is usually someone else's beginning, especially in storytelling. I still can't believe how horrifyingly competent the show made the boots on the ground Imperials. They were and they weren't. They were competent when things were going their way. Every time things went a direction they didn't understand, they fell apart. Ferrix, they fell apart. because they weren't orchestrating that. Gorman, they were competent because that was the plan. You know, they sent out the newbies to start the riot, but everything else was all planned. You know, so even those guys, even that hallway scene that we got here at the end, methodical, knew exactly what they were doing. Okay, let's do this. Then they had a very big wrench thrown in their plan, and they had no idea how to compensate. That's the Empire. Every time you throw something at them they didn't anticipate, they collapse. They panic. Bye, Summer. Great that you stopped by. Really appreciated your comments today. They've been great. I'm actually going to call it a day here in a minute because 2 hours. This is the longest I've definitely gone talking in a long time. But I mean, this series, I could honestly keep going for like 4 more. There is so much to unpack here. If we want to do a part 2 to this next week, I'll still happily talk about it. Even though I don't think there's gonna be much going on next week, but we'll see. I'm gonna get through some of these last comments though before we head out. Summer's last comment. I think for the Palpatine, the droids also didn't feed the dark side, and in that while he inspired fear, they did not provide anything to the dark side themselves. Right, because the dark side does feed off of fear, and I think that's absolutely true. Where the droids instill fear, but he also draws power from the fear inside the stormtroopers or inside the troops themselves. So yeah, I think the droids, it probably made the droids not a priority. Plus, droids were also the thing the Republic fought against, so it was probably harder for them to justify using droids. Oh, Kenny, you mean the more things that hadn't been taken seriously before. TIE, stormtroopers, KX droids. I watched the show and finally understood how the ordinary people would be so afraid of these things. Right. My point from earlier still stands about the fact that those things are terrifying, but I'm sorry, the Empire can be competent, but only when things are organized. But yeah, oh, absolutely. Well, it did such a good job because we usually see Jedi and these bigger than life heroes, et cetera, fighting the Empire. So when we're watching this boots on the ground, and we do get those everyday civilians' perspective, yeah, those things are terrifying. TIE fighters are terrifying, especially when you're on the ground. TIE fighters are terrifying, especially when you don't have the Force and you're flying through an asteroid storm. Or you're, traveling through the highlands and can't be spotted and the TIE fighter flying overhead. Those are terrifying things. Yeah, I'm down for a part 2. Yeah, I think we're going to be doing a part 2 next week. Because yeah, I have a feeling even after this, I'll be thinking about it. I'll be sleeping on it. At this rate, I may even just start rewatching the whole series because, dear God, it's so good. At any rate, though, I am going to call it a day. Thank you all so much for joining me. This was the best chat I think we've had on here in a very long time. I don't want to stress that too much. It sounds really reductive to our chats, but no, I just think this is because this is one of the best series we've had to talk about in such a long time. I just think the chat, the things that we've discussed today has been just top notch. And yeah, we might have to do a part 2 next weekend. So just keep an eye out. Thank you all for joining me. It's been great today. I hope you have a great rest of your weekend and whatever you're getting up to. And hopefully I will see you later on in comments later throughout the week. And yeah, just have a good week, everyone. I will talk to you later, and going to be a little cliche today. Steal a line from Bail Organa. May the force be with you. Take care. Bye-bye.